Hello, folks. Come on in. Let's get this kicked off. Need light? More light?
Yeah.
Oh.
Light on you.
Oh, okay.
You don't want to do it? I can adjust.
Okay, you sure?
No.
Well,
I'll talk to Steve.
okay, yeah, Steve. Okay. Welcome.
Hey, look important real quick.
Look what? Oh, yeah. Okay. So we're gonna get started here. Welcome to the 2018 National Bike Summit. Now, I'm Bill Nesper. I'm the Executive Director of the League. And on behalf of the staff and the board, we thank you for being here to share your stories, to listen and learn, and to work together to strengthen our shared work to build a truly bicycle-friendly America for all. As a member of the League staff for 15 years and 15 summits later, I can assure you that we have a fantastic few days together in store for you. So I'd like to call out first the League staff and the board. Just sort of stand up for a second. I want to recognize our team. I can't thank these folks enough for all the great work that they do to serve you and to help strengthen the League and strengthen your voice both here in Washington and also help you at the local level. We're really honored to represent you. So please connect with a board member or a member of the staff and let us know how we can serve you better. Huge thanks to all of our sponsors who have made this event possible. And a special thanks to our gold level sponsors Aptiv, Fuji, New Belgium Brewing Company, and People for Bikes. If you feel like sharing during your time here at the summit, we really want to encourage that. And there are a couple of different ways you can do it. For those of you on social media, I think that's all of us, right? The hashtag is NBS18. If you feel like doing a bike summit selfie, that's also a hashtag. Getting kind of fancy these days. And then also for the lobby day, there's also bike lobby day. So I think that all of them are there. Yep, bike lobby day. I'm really excited to be opening up the summit as the executive director here. And while we know that so much work remains to be done to make bicycling safe and comfortable and open to all, it's important to take a moment to recognize how far we've come together. As a movement, one indicator of our growth is that we now have a tradition of having the U.S. Secretary of Transportation speak at the National Bike Summit. It truly is an honor. And it reinforces that we're part of the solution and that we're at the table in developing the future of transportation in our country. So it is my honor to introduce the Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao. This is not her first time at the Department of Transportation or her first time as a cabinet secretary. Under President George H.W. Bush, Chao served in several roles at the Department of Transportation, including the Deputy Secretary of Transportation. Under President George W. Bush, Chao was sworn in as the first Asian Pacific American woman to serve as a Secretary of Labor. In her first year as secretary, the Department of Transportation has issued a new strategic plan, advanced the regulatory architecture for a safe deployment of transformative transportation technologies, including autonomous vehicles, and has been engaged in the White House deliberations on a $1 trillion infrastructure proposal. We look forward to hearing from her about priorities on transportation and how bicycling and walking fit into it. So I'd like to welcome Secretary Chao.
Nice seeing you. Thank you, Bill. I'm so glad to see all of you. I need to get on a bike more often. Before I begin, let me acknowledge some Department of Transportation colleagues who are here. Would the Department of Transportation team members stand up? There they are. Great. You also have a very dedicated member, Tam Somerville, who's a senior advisor to the secretary. She actually commutes to work on a bike. The team here is working very hard to improve bicycle safety and access, and they're eager to gain your insights and ideas, and pleased to share their in-depth knowledge as well. There are many, many Department of Transportation bicyclists who can't be here today in person, but who are here in spirit. And I have to say that also includes the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Jeff Rosen. He is an avid bicyclist who I am told rides centuries. It takes an adventurous spirit to bicycle around DC or any urban area or country road, especially on roads without bike infrastructure and with deteriorating surfaces. So our nation's infrastructure is in need of repair in so many different ways. Far too many drivers simply are not paying attention or not paying enough attention to driving safely and looking out for other road users, especially the most vulnerable road users, and that's America's bicyclists and pedestrians. Yeah. It is deeply concerning to all of us at the department that bicycle fatalities have been trending up in recent years. 829 in 2015, which is a 13.7% increase over the year before. 840 bicyclist fatalities in 2016, a 1.3% increase. So unnecessary. What tragedies. The 2017 figures are not yet complete, and we will watch those carefully. But with bicycling increasing in popularity as a mode of transportation and recreational activity, it's never been more important than ever to advance safety and also accessibility. One of the most remarkable developments in biking in the past few years is the astounding increase in bike sharing. I've been told it's increased like from 340,000 in bike share trips annually in 2010 to around 30 million today. That is an incredible increase. And here in DC, we see these brightly colored dockless share bikes. They've been appearing all over the city in the last few months. It's another transportation innovation that has the potential to help people in all neighborhoods and every income level to get to where they need to go while realizing the health benefits of bicycling as well. Bike commuting has increased 60% in the last decade. So making safe bicycling more accessible can help people who actually have to use the bike to get to work, as well as benefit those who bike for other reasons as well. The League of American Bicyclists has a proud history. It's over 140 years old. It was originally founded to advocate for better roads. It's still a compelling and persuasive voice for improving our country's infrastructure. Arguably, no one experiences the inadequacies of our infrastructure more keenly than do America's bicyclists. You can clap on that too. Every bump, every pothole you feel. For the past year, 12 federal departments have been working together to develop a comprehensive infrastructure improvement plan. It encompasses not only transportation, but energy, drinking and wastewater, rural broadband, and veterans hospitals as well. That plan was delivered to the Congress on February 12th of this year, and it has started a much-needed discussion on infrastructure priorities, how to pay for them, and how to get them completed more quickly. I was in Alaska last August telling Alaskans at an event that they finally got permission to build a road in a rural area for medical emergency purposes. Do you know how long that road took just to get that permission? 35 years. So we need to get projects going faster, and I'll talk a little bit about that without compromising the environment, of course. The goal of the President's proposal is to stimulate at least $1.5 trillion in infrastructure investment, and this will include a minimum of $200 billion in direct federal funding. The guiding principles are simple. There are 4 of them. One is to use federal dollars as seed money to incentivize infrastructure investments. Because when the federal government is involved, we actually are kind of like the seal of the housekeeping seal of, I'm not getting that right. You know what I mean? The good housekeeping seal of approval. So we can actually entice other groups to come in and help finance. We have talked to many private sector groups, private sector pensions, for example, who are very anxious to come and invest in public infrastructure. They, first of all, would like conservative investments. 2, collaterals that do not walk away. Roads and bridges will not walk away. And they bear the major first-line tier of risk. So we hope that we will incentivize the private sector to come more into financing public infrastructure. And as of now, we have 26 states that disallow the private sector, like private pension funds, who invest for the long term, from investing in public infrastructure. The second guiding principle is to provide the needs of rural communities. We know that rural America has different needs, and they may not be able to tap public-private partnerships, so how are we going to help them? 3, we need to streamline permitting and speed up project delivery so that we can have more projects that are more ready to be improved and enhanced so that users can have a better experience. And 4, we need to reduce unnecessary and overly burdensome regulations. And in addition, a key element of the proposal is to empower decision-making at the state and local level, because we believe that local and state leaders and the community know best what the infrastructure needs are. Half of the new infrastructure funds will go toward incentivizing new state and local investments. A quarter of the federal funds will be dedicated to rural infrastructure. And as a former Secretary of Labor, I'm pleased to note that this plan also has a workforce component to help train workers so that they have the skills that are necessary to build these new projects. The administration, as I mentioned, believes in empowering the local communities. And the federal government owns interstate networks of roads and bridges, but the local state government actually own the rest. So we need to partner with the local and state governments. And one way that the Department of Transportation empowers state and local decision makers is to provide national planning and design resources that help our partners and stakeholders deliver high-quality projects and improve outcomes in the transportation planning process. An example of this is a new resource from the Federal Highway Administration that I'm announcing today on measuring multimodal network connectivity. So I think you will see these booklets around. This is what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. I hope that you'll get a copy. This resource focuses on pedestrian and bicycle network connectivity, and and provides information on incorporating connectivity analysis into state, metropolitan, and local transportation planning processes. If you don't have it in hard copy, please go on our website, www.dot.gov/highways. This report is now available on the Federal Highway Administration's website, as I just mentioned. And to learn more about this exciting new resource, there is a Department of Transportation staff session here at the summit tomorrow at 2 o'clock. As you may know, my priorities as secretary are: 1, is safety must always be number 1. 2, let's rebuild and improve our infrastructure. And 3, we need to be planning for the future in terms of managing new technologies. Because as you know, we're in the midst of this transformational age in transportation. New technologies such as autonomous or self-driving vehicles, bike-to-vehicle communications, and other innovations could further transform the way we travel and connect with one another. These new technologies have the potential to improve safety for all road users by addressing human error, which is a factor in 94% of traffic fatalities. They can also increase access to transportation for the underserved communities, including the elderly and people with disabilities, by giving them back their mobility and their freedom. But I also know there are legitimate concerns over these new emerging technologies in regard to safety, security, and privacy. And so last September, the department issued guidelines on the deployment of autonomous vehicles called A Vision for Safety 2.0. And because technology is changing so rapidly, an update on this, it's still going to be called Autonomous Vehicles 3.0, A Vision for Safety, hopefully will be released as early as this summer. This new AV guidelines will be multimodal. It will include various surface transportation systems, such as trucks, rail, mass transit, and it will again highlight the need for autonomous vehicles to operate safely and carefully in proximity to bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as other vehicles. So let me commend everyone here at the summit who, in professional capacities and as individual enthusiasts and community activists, are promoting and advancing bike safety and accessibility. All of us know the real vital role that bicycles offer in terms of commutes, the health benefits that it bestows upon those who enjoy this on a professional or as a hobbyist. And so we welcome your input and really invite you to bring your insights and passion forward on behalf of America's bicyclists. Thank you for all that you're doing every day to promote bicycle safety and access, and thanks for partnering with us and sharing with us your insights. So.
Well, thank you so much for your remarks. Just a couple of
First,
questions.
congratulations.
Oh, thanks very much. It's great to be in this role and to get to be up here with you. So in the new, one question is, how will biking and walking projects fare under the White House's infrastructure plan?
I think the good news is that the infrastructure proposal will be very decentralized is another way. We are going to empower the locals and state entities. So we will not be dictating. So these are decisions that need to be made at the local level, at the state level, and also in your own communities. So to the extent that you care about these issues, you will continue to speak out and advocate for this lifestyle, but also for this very important alternative option available for commuters. So I view it as very good news in that the plan basically really empowers the state, local communities.
Thanks for that. Another one, knowing that autonomous vehicles, like the most recent reports, hearing that automated driving systems, like recently in a Slate article, brought forth the fact that bicyclists might not be as readily seen by these systems as pedestrians and other automobiles. What is the department doing to invest in research? We heard about 3.0, 2.0. Glad that it's a moving thing. It's obviously evolving. How is that a priority to make sure that the research is there and that we're being seen and protected?
These autonomous vehicles need to recognize everything around them as if it were a human being. And so bicyclists they share the road, and they need to be, they are a factor on the road. So I've actually been to Silicon Valley in August of last year, and I have been in discussion with Silicon Valley and also to Detroit for the OEMs, automobile manufacturers. 74% of Americans don't feel that comfortable in a self-driving car, being in it. And if you use the word driverless cars, that anxiety actually increases. So there are legitimate concerns about safety, security, and privacy on autonomous vehicles. And if Silicon Valley or if the auto manufacturers really want people to accept them, they have to address these issues. These are basic issues about safety. So I am just astounded that these questions would even arise. Of course they have to be addressed.
Great.
And I am very cognizant of...
We're glad to hear you say that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, good to
I'm
hear.
very cognizant of this community's concern about safety.
Well, what can
And
we do
so-
as a community?
I think through this association and through discussions with our transportation team and in all the forums that there are, continue to speak out. The technology of automated vehicles is still, it's constantly evolving. They are now at a level 2, but and level 2 means a vehicle can go on a highway where there will not be very many bicyclists, pedestrians, high-speed highways, and they will follow 99% of the time without problems the white road, the white markings on the highway. But as they go to tier level 3, level 4, it gets more complicated, and there's some experimentation now going on streets, but clearly the technology has to recognize all users of roads, and that is a basic fundamental safety issue that the department will not compromise on.
Excellent.
So,
Well, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, I know you have to get going, and thanks for being with us, and
thanks so much.
thanks for your leadership. So now, great. Well, thank you, Secretary Chao. So now I'm going to invite Karen Whitaker, our Vice President of Government Relations at the League, to come up and introduce the next panel.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. And that was really exciting. It's great to hear that the Department of Transportation is working on filling those gaps in networks. That's actually on our list of things to talk about in Hill offices. So we're very excited to hear that USDOT and the Federal Highways is working on a lot of the same things we are. So I'm looking forward to the FHWA session tomorrow as well. So thanks for that. What I'd like to do now is bring up a couple of stakeholders who also work on transportation in Washington to talk about the infrastructure package and automated vehicles and the other sort of big news happening in Washington. So I'm going to start by introducing Eric Zimmerman, who's with the National Association of Regional Councils. So, yep, I'm going to sit down. So the National Association of Regional Councils is a coalition of local groups that work regionally on regional issues, both urban areas and rural areas, and just all over the country. And they have been a great ally of ours as we've pushed forward on local control and getting more of the funding down to that local level where people really know what the needs are for that community. So I want to thank Eric again for being here. So, and then I see our other panelists just walked. Our other panelists just walked in the room. Thanks. So with that, I'm gonna didn't give him a second to catch his breath. So with that, I'd like to introduce Robert Puentes, who's with the Eno Center on Transportation. Thanks. Thank you for being here. And the Eno Center is basically a think tank that's dedicated to transportation, and it's great to have them in town because we all come at it from our angle. So I come at transportation from a bicycling angle. Eric comes at it from a local government angle. So it's nice to have Eno there that's sort of looking at the broad picture and seeing seeing the whole system as one. And Robert Puentes is the president and CEO. And I gotta tell you, when I first started working on transportation and bicycling, and I had some questions on transportation funding that were a little more complex. You know, I would talk to Hill staffers, I would talk to other people in the advocacy world, and they would say, yeah, you know, there's really like 10 people in Washington, D.C. that really understand transportation funding. And I have to say, Robert Puentes' name is one of the names that comes up that really understands the whole piece. Before Eno, he was at Brookings, where he specialized on funding and finance, but also in city and urban planning. Is that right? So it's a great honor to have both of these guests here to talk with us about the infrastructure plan. So thank you again for coming. So my first question is, we just heard the Secretary of Transportation come and talk about the infrastructure package, and at the same time talk about the issues of local control and multimodal projects, and a lot of the things that we've cared about, that this is funding that will improve safety, that will build multimodal projects, that will increase local control. And she talked about it as being decentralized. And I just wanted to ask both of you, when you look at the plan, we do see the funding going to different agencies, different levels of government. Does this plan really answer those questions about creating multimodal networks and local? I'm going to start with local control with Eric. Do you see this as the kind of local control we've been pushing for?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you all for having me here today. I certainly appreciate being here and sharing what I hope are some good insights with you all. So we're certainly appreciative of the package as presented. Any new investment in infrastructure is, of course, something our members welcome, most of whom do work on transportation, do the planning and project execution within their communities. And so we certainly are pleased that this discussion has begun, that Washington actually, when you go to your Hill offices, will most likely be thinking about infrastructure and interested in talking with you about it. I have to wonder a little bit exactly the level of local control that the President's package contains, however. You know, the project development, of course, would happen at the local level, and the funding would be expected to come from the local level. Certainly, that's been explicit. At least 80% of the funding for a project would be local funding, and the higher that number is, the higher that percentage is, the better your project is likely to do under the criteria. But the ultimate decision for which projects are going to be built still remains in Washington. So to some extent, it's kind of bureaucratic devolution is the phrase I've been using for lack of something better. So the funding of a project is devolving to the local level, but I think the real authority on picking the project still remains here in Washington, and I think that in itself poses a particular problem.
Okay, great, thanks. And Rob, I know you've talked about whether or not this bill represents devolution, and could you explain for a second what devolution is? And a little bit, and expand on what Eric was saying about this plan as devolution.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late. It's a different kind of day. I had financing issues of my own, nothing to do with transportation. So yeah, I think the larger ethos with the infrastructure package, and I agree with Eric, it's good that they're talking about it. It's good that this has been pushed closer to the front burner of the policy discourse. But we need more information. We need to figure out exactly how this stuff is going to get done, exactly how does it get implemented on the ground. The federal government doesn't, right, they're not responsible in the same way that states and localities and metropolitan areas are responsible. So the execution is really going to matter here. The issue about devolution, I think, is more of an ideology related to what this administration has talked about. They're trying to get Washington out of a lot of areas of policy, transportation being one. And so I think this is reflective of that. It shouldn't be much of a surprise. They've talked about it for, since the very beginning. So what this bill, I think, reflects is trying to take Washington's role and what they would say right size it, to put it in its, to kind of put a little boundaries behind it and recognize what's been happening over the last few years is that there has been more city, state, and metro increase in the transportation sector. With debt and dysfunction kind of taking place here in Washington under any administration, we've seen localities and cities and metros pick up the pace. Funding money for new projects, it's where a lot of the innovation is happening. And so this kind of corresponds, I think, very well with where the administration is trying to go, getting Washington out of a lot of these things. Now, I think a lot of us would disagree with what Washington's role should be, but the devolution is really taking that federal or those responsibilities and pushing them down to the state, metropolitan, and the city level. I don't think it reflects really the reality of how transportation decisions are made. We do need a strong federal partner, but I think what they're trying to do is right-size the situation that exists right now.
Okay, great, thanks. And I think one of the reasons that we're hearing more and more about devolution is because we're hearing more and more about the crisis in funding for transportation, and that the Highway Trust Fund, that the gas taxes that are coming in aren't enough to pay for the money that's going out to pay for transportation. In the last few weeks, we've heard a lot of talk about increasing the gas tax, whether it's from the Chamber of Commerce, the American Trucking Association, or some new surprising voices in that realm being President Trump and Chairman Bill Schuster, he's the chairman of the Transportation Department. Does this feel different to you both? Does this feel like we may see some movement on an increase in funding for the Highway Trust Fund?
I just had my meeting with my members, and the way I put it to them is I still don't know that I see a path to that happening this year. We would like it to happen this year. We wish it would happen this year. And certainly sometime between now and 2020 and 2020, all of the transfers that we've done to date into the Highway Trust Fund, some $140 billion to date, the Highway Trust Fund at that point still becomes a problem where the funding, or the spending, I'm sorry, starts to outpace the funding coming into the trust fund. And that is a significant issue, an issue that I know my members have already started poking and prodding and making sure that that remains the conversation at the front lines of this discussion. I think that's reflected in a lot of the organizations that you saw respond, that you saw put out principles as to what should be contained in the infrastructure package. Almost all of them included a discussion of solvency of the Highway Trust Fund being the #1 issue that all of us are focused on, simply because that the trust fund, the current existing national transportation program is real. It is what we have. It is what is funding projects in each of your communities and in each of the regions where my members exist. And so that's what we need to be focused on, is ensuring that what we currently have in the hand is properly funded. The easiest way, certainly in the near term, to do that is an increase in the fuel tax. Certainly I applaud the small ticks we can see in that direction. I still think there's an awfully long way to go in doing that. There has been discussion potentially of waiting till, say, after the election when things are a little bit easier. I'm always reluctant to believe in the lame duck theory on things. There's always a lot of promise in the lame duck, and quite frequently, most often, nothing actually of real substance gets done at that point. So this needs to be a conversation or a decision that Congress makes. It's not an easy one. I don't think we're going to be able to push it off and sort of hide it and pretend like it's not a major decision. It is. It is, in fact, now had so many things, I think, hung on it as a decision that it's just gotten even that much harder. At the end of the day, and I don't want to belittle anybody's economic situation and how much it would mean in terms of an investment on a monthly or yearly basis, but it really isn't an enormous investment that we I think would all applaud making into our infrastructure system. And yet I think so much has now been hung on it that it's become sort of a litmus test, I guess, for where you stand on increasing taxes or not. And yet it is ultimately the best user fee that we have, because it really does get funneled directly into the system that the users who are paying it are using. So I don't know if I answered the question exactly, but that's the long way of saying I think we've got a challenge ahead.
Well, I could answer it better. That's a great answer. I think things are a little bit different. People aren't saying hell no; they're saying maybe, or or we won't. We'll see. I mean, so that is different, but it's still a very strange time here in Washington. It's an understatement. But to give you a good example, they just squashed a proposal to reform the nation's air traffic control system. And I've been in this business for 20 years. I haven't seen an issue that was so aligned and so necessary. This hit every single one of those notes. There's a little coalition that's opposed to it, and the thing was just killed. So it just goes to show that even the best ideas, you can line up as many of the proper stakeholders as you want. There's still enough in Washington to kill any good idea, even like this.
And just to follow up on that, we've also heard a little bit about vehicle miles traveled taxes, or something to replace the gas tax. Because when we talk about the gas tax, now that cars are becoming more efficient, we're getting more electric vehicles out there, the gas tax, there's a question of how useful it will be going into the future. Are those things being investigated? Why are we still talking about the gas tax when there may be better options out there?
Well, again, we have to separate the conversation happening in Washington, in federal Washington, from what's happening out in the real world, the places that Eric represents. There is a lot of experimentation and a lot of testing, a lot of new ideas that are happening. I think California just recently passed, they're going to be doing the biggest VMT tests anywhere. There's a whole bunch of other places that are doing it. Tennessee recently passed a vehicle miles traveled charge for autonomous vehicles, recognizing that there aren't any in Tennessee yet, but there's no constituency to push against it. It's not a bad idea. But when they do come online, there'll be they'll have that ready. And so I think the action that's happening in the states is very different from what's happening here in Washington. But I do think Washington should start to figure out what does that transition look like. We've been doing this for 15 years, recognizing the unsustainability of the gas tax for all the reasons that you mentioned. But we need to move much faster for things like a VMT charge on the federal level. We're not there yet.
Okay. And just before we leave the infrastructure package, one of the questions that I've been asked is, well, if we're not sure that they're going to raise the gas tax, and there's been all this back and forth on the infrastructure package, do we think there's a chance to get an infrastructure package? And if we're not sure, why are we all here, right? We're here to talk about the infrastructure package. We know that the regional councils, you were just saying you were doing meetings. The counties are up doing meetings, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the manufacturers, the general contractors. We've all jumped on this opportunity. Like, why is having this conversation important right now when we don't know where the funding's coming from?
So I'll say this, as I mentioned earlier, I feel as though the infrastructure package is sort of in the not real category of what we're contending with in Washington. Not that it's not out there, not that it's not driving the conversation, it very much is. We have to wait for legislative text, first of all, and that's going to come out of both the House and the Senate are going to do, if we see any action on this, that's where it's going to start. So we don't have legislative text yet, so we don't know, as they say, the devil being in the details. We don't know where the devils are yet. We don't know how this is going to play out, and we certainly don't know where the funding might come from. And so that gets into another one of the sort of unreal pieces, but one that still remains in the real world, which is the president's budget. There are significant proposed cuts within the president's budget. It's been discussed and bandied about that may be the way to pay for an infrastructure package, is to cut infrastructure funding. So I have a little bit of a hard time figuring that one out. But significant cuts to transit, to the Tiger program, to Amtrak, really, in my thinking, aren't great ways to pay for other infrastructure in other areas. And so I think that's a real challenge. So the funding is certainly a challenge in this case, whether it comes from that source or it comes from another source. It won't be trust fund dollars, because trust fund dollars go into the existing program. So they're going to have to come up with a way to fund this through some other means. We're not clear on what those are until those are made more clear, until the details of the package are made more clear with legislative text. I think it remains a major question as to where this is headed and what the possibility is of seeing something this year.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so now one thing that we've seen is we are really in this time of change and transformation for transportation and for cities. I would say maybe it started with the sharing culture, where we started with car share and then bike share, and then we moved to Uber and Lyft. And now we're seeing automated vehicles come in, maybe the Hyperloop, all different kinds of transportation pieces. But how do we, both as local governments and as people who care about biking and walking and transit and those sort of existing forms of transportation, how do we stay in this conversation? And what advice do you have for us to keep these modes in the conversation and in cities as we move forward, and all communities as we move into the future?
I would say it's that you're in the conversation. That this is that what you just described is what the conversation is. And building off what Eric was talking about, it's the conversation in Washington is frustrating. It's spasmodic. We kind of push forward, we lurch back, and nothing really seems to get done. There's lots of other areas of policy we can point to that are very similar to that. But what you described, I think, is exactly why this is such an exciting and dynamic time to be working in transportation. Lots of experimentation, lots of new partnerships, lots of new ideas, and they're all coming from those city states and the metropolitan areas. They're coming from outside of Washington. When I think that the active transportation community, bike, everything else is all right as a part of that, because it's only in the stovepipe world of Washington where those issues are kept separate and kind of kept apart. When you talk to folks on the ground, political, civic, business leaders, philanthropic leaders, they don't think about them as separate modes. They think about these as all connected ways how people get around, how we connect close. So I would just spin your comment a little bit, that's really what's happening. We need to wait for Washington to react at some point.
So at our conference a couple of weeks ago, Congresswoman Esty from Connecticut joined us in a quick pitch. She's a member of the Innovation Caucus, the infrastructure. They came up with an infrastructure plan through the Innovation Caucus. I would point you in that direction. It's not a perfect plan, but one that leads with shoring up the trust fund and some of the other things that we've been making the point for. As well, it's a bipartisan caucus. There's 40 members, 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats. So when you bring them to the table, you're already bringing a sizable bipartisan caucus to the table on these issues. But the thing the biggest point she made was tell your story. And I'm sure that is part of what you're here to talk about today, and I think it's really reflects what Rob is saying. The conversation is ongoing. You are part of the conversation. Continue to tell your story as to why it's important that you remain a part of that conversation. I would also say continue to make the point that the conversation is also that the federal government is a partner. Unfortunately, one of the things I find challenging about the infrastructure package is that states and local governments are considered leverage. I mean, you know, we make up, when they say 1.5 trillion, that 0.5 trillion is state and local funds. So, you know, but we're not leverage, we're partners. This is a unique program that doesn't exist really anywhere else and across the government. And it is that partnership that has gotten us to where we are today, which is certainly significant. And that's all partners. It's not just one part of that partnership can carry the rest of it. We all have to be working together. And so I think telling that story, telling your story, why your story fits in with that, but also the important role that the federal relationship plays in that is an exceedingly important message to be sending right now.
Great, thank you. And I want to ask one more question. We talked about some of the exciting things happening in the future. I want to switch now for a second and talk about climate change and the effects of climate change on infrastructure. And what we're seeing, how, if we've seen those effects, what we expect in the future, and then how do we prepare for that in talking about infrastructure and transportation?
Certainly, again, if you're focused outside of Washington, this is the dominant part of the conversation. I would say that we're preparing for it in episodic kind of ways. Some places are dealing with it quite a bit, some places are not at all. But I feel like what's happened is that it's kind of gotten through, because we've had such high-profile disasters, it's jumped out of transportation into really what the civic and the business communities are talking about in these places. And Houston is a great example of what's happening around the Gulf region. Once it starts to become an economic proposition, it's a much bigger tent, right? And I think that's what we've gotten to very recently, unfortunately.
And I can say just from my perspective, the number of members that are interested in this as a topic area alone, driven in part by the economics, but just the reality that I think folks are facing on the ground with, you know, increased costs due to some of the storms and some of the other effects of climate change. There's no doubt that there is much greater interest of integrating these questions into the planning process and sort of calibrating the investment decisions in a way to reflect, you know, the recognition that this is going to be with us, this is going to be something that we have to contend with, and to make decisions now that don't reflect that really are not being the best stewards of taxpayer dollars as we go into the future.
Okay, well, that's great, and I just want to, I mean, that is something that we're starting to think about, and what is the role of biking and walking, both when we're building that infrastructure now to help people so that that infrastructure is there when they need to leave a community, when they need to evacuate, but also when they come back, that there's still some of that. But also one of the things that we're seeing after major storm events is that biking is sometimes the only way to get around and to get supplies in and to get to people that may be stuck in their homes and things like that. So this is one thing that we're really starting to think about. So I appreciate hearing that, and you'll be hearing more about that as we move forward. I think so. Thank you for coming. I want to thank you for being here and getting some response from some other stakeholders here in Washington. So thanks to Rob and Eric. And we look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you, and I'm going to invite Bill up to invite up our next panel. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for that. That was really great. So now, I'd like to ask Jeff Marootian, who is the director of the District Department of Transportation, and Greg Billing, who's the executive director of the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, to join me on stage for a special announcement. So as many of you know, the League's Bicycle Friendly Community Program has been a great tool as a roadmap for change and recognition for improvements that are making bicycling safe, comfortable, and open to all in a community. And for the last 20 years, the BFC program has been a platform for inspiration and collaboration for advocates, agency staff, and local decision makers. Over 430 communities now have been recognized as a bicycle-friendly community. So today, we're thrilled to be presenting Washington, D.C. with the gold level designation. Yeah. This reflects all the work that both within the agencies and within the advocacy community are doing alike. Receiving the gold award is no small feat, we have to remind everyone, especially for a major city. So DC is was first awarded bronze in 2003. I was there. And it was so great. And silver in 2011, and now this gold award, and the growth of people that we see riding, you'll see them as you're here in this great city, are reflective of the bicycling culture, the comprehensive work to expand low-stress bicycling network, offering regular bicycling education, including every second grader in town getting bicycling education. Amazing. Yeah. And, being a real leader, innovator in bike sharing and working to reach every neighborhood in the city. So congratulations for the award, and we look forward to seeing our nation's capital continue to make bicycling better for all. So, thank you. So this is the, yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Bill. We are so thrilled to be here and to receive this great honor. Let me just first welcome you all on behalf of our Mayor, Muriel Bowser, to the District of Columbia. I have with me an official welcome letter from our mayor that I would love to present to the League. And we hope that you have the opportunity, for those of you who are visiting us from out of town, to explore all of the cultural attractions that our city has to offer, and we hope that when you're doing that, you do it on a bike. Among those, we certainly hope that you will explore the trails that we have in our city, which have continued to develop and expand over the past several years. Let me acknowledge and thank Secretary Chao and the team at USDOT, with whom we enjoy a great partnership. So thank you all for your help and support. Let me thank my friend Greg Billing and the team at WABA, for all of their support and advocacy. Let's give them a round of applause. As somebody who has lived in the district for over 20 years, it is really remarkable for me to see the great progress that we've made as a city. And I want to just share some of the successes that we've had. I first started working for DDOT in 2008. At that time, we had an estimated 7,000 people biking to work every day. 10 years later, that number has more than doubled. We are close to 17,000. 10 years ago, we were getting ready to launch Smart Bike DC, the first municipal bike sharing system in the country, with 10 stations and 100 bikes. Today, we have Capital Bike Share, with 270 stations in DC alone, 400 throughout the region, and 4,000 bikes. And that doesn't count all of the dockless bikes, which I'm sure you've seen, and some of you have probably taken a ride on. In 2008, we had just 30 miles of bike lanes. Today, we have over 80 miles, including 8 miles of protected lanes. In 2008, we had installed over 700 new bike racks. Today, working with the city's business improvement districts and other partners, we have over 3,500. And in 2008, we were number 6 in the country for biking to work by city residents. Now we are number 2 in the country. Yes. And we currently have 60 miles of trails in the district, and we serve as the hub of a regional network of bicycle trails that connects residents to jobs and neighborhoods and to parks. And that's really just the beginning. We're not even close to done. In 2018, we will be opening new protected bike lanes on Virginia Ave Southeast here in the district, and K Street and Water Street in Georgetown, linking the Capitol Crescent and Rock Creek trails. Construction has begun very recently on a new Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, which will connect to new protected bike lanes that are being constructed alongside the soccer stadium in Southwest, and with the Suitland Parkway Trail, the South Capitol Street Trail, and the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. And there are several others that I could list. So we are working collaboratively with all of our partners, with the residents, with our advocacy community here in the district to make our city as safe and accessible as it can be for everyone. And I hope that while you're here, you'll have a chance to see some of our accomplishments for yourselves. So thank you all very much. We're so thrilled to be here, and I look forward to spending the afternoon with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I want to bring Greg Billing back up to introduce the next panel. So Greg is a fantastic example of a local partner. The League is so excited to be representing 250 state and local groups around the country, and just really, we look to WABA for really great examples of what can be done into the city, everything that you've done here. So really excited to be based here, so get to see all the work close up, and thanks for everything you do. So Greg, take it away.
Thank you. Give him a second to turn.
Yeah, give him a second. Oh, yeah. Is it on? Yeah, he should turn it on.
Test 1, 2. Here we go. There we go.
Good. Okay.
Wonderful. It's great to have a mic. Hello. Again, thanks, Bill, and thanks for the League for hosting us. Really excited to have this welcoming panel. Often, as the local guy, it's not often that we get to talk about DC. We're talking about all of your communities, which I've really enjoyed over the years. So really excited to kind of highlight the work we've done here. So I want to bring up a few more panelists. We have Veronica Davis, co-founder of Black Women Bike DC, and also co-owner and principal of Inspire Green. And Ellen Jones is the Deputy Executive Director for the Downtown Business Improvement District. Also a familiar face at the summit. And then I'm also joined by the DDOT Director, Jeff Marootian, so thank you. For those of you who don't know who WABA is, we're a 501c3. We're the Regional Advocacy and Education Organization. We are 46 years strong. We were founded in 1972. We had a great event yesterday, the Leadership Retreat, and it was fun to kind of work with all of our partners and see kind of the age and experience of all of the local work that you guys do. Congrats again to the District Department of Transportation, to Mayor Bowser, to all of the city agencies that have worked tirelessly to make DC a bicycle-friendly community. It really is a team effort here, and WABA has been really happy to be a partner in that work. This panel, we're going to have a little discussion about kind of how did DC get to be a gold-friendly community, and what is it really going to take to get that next level of platinum and that elusive diamond award. So I'm excited to kind of explore some of those discussions. So I wanted to start with the panelists. We've got a whole bunch of visitors in town. I bet a bunch of them brought bikes with them or know how to find them. They're all around town to rent. Where is your favorite place to ride in DC? Where should people go explore?
Well, I am personally partial to the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which I encourage all of you to explore. And we have some DDOT staff members here who can give you their favorite specific parts of it. But I think it's hopefully the weather is just warm enough for us to all be out there and explore that particular trail.
So I'm going to recommend the throwback Pennsylvania Avenue bike lanes. I think it's, one of our older protected bike, buffered bike lanes. But I think it is really great. The U.S. Capitol is one of my favorite buildings. And so particularly at sundown, it's really great to bike on that street and to see the Capitol and then the sun and all that good stuff. So that's my recommendation.
Let's see. My favorite place to bicycle is Connecticut Avenue during rush hour. And, I have been doing it so long, if I'm not enjoying it, what am I doing out there? But seriously, what that means is I think any place in DC is best seen by bicycle, be it a scenic trail, be it a historic view shed. The best thing to do is do it on a bike.
That's great. Ellen, and that's a great segue. So your council members certainly would love to see a bike lane on Connecticut. But you have some history working on bike advocacy in DC. You certainly are no stranger to this event. What are some of the key points that have kind of gotten DC where it is? What could we learn as far as the progress and kind of how we achieve where we are?
I think that persistence is the watchword for both folks that are career professionals in government and also for the advocacy community. Bicycling advancement comes in waves. It's not a steady state. As you mentioned, Greg, WABA itself is 46 years in the making, and DC's bicycle program with stops and starts is even older than that, going back to the I think around 1969, 1970. So bicycle progress is kind of like your worst bike ride. It kind of goes up and down and up and down. And persistence and taking the long view, taking the very long view, I think is the key. And progress can be made, but not quickly and not easily, but certainly, it certainly has been made in DC.
Sure. So it's an interesting observation as far as the persistence and kind of the long view. I think there's probably some reaction, Veronica, of how quickly DC has changed for biking. Your role as a principal and co-owner of Inspire Green, you do community outreach and consulting for cities around sustainability goals. You work a lot with the community. What is the reaction to kind of what we've seen? Is it feel that way?
Well, it all depends on what project you're talking about. I have a project in DC, and many of you know about it. It's made national news, where we are we're challenged where, parking is a commodity, and it is like the third rail of politics. And so it's been an ongoing project and ongoing conversations, trying to balance installing protected bike lanes and particularly church parking. However, the other thing I've seen, in my role in Black Women Bike, and also my role as a transportation planner, is that there is a genuine interest in this idea of biking. One of my projects, we were looking at putting bike lanes on New Hampshire, and these women, were in my face, and they're like, "Why would you ever put bike lanes on New Hampshire Avenue?" And they're yelling at me. And so I said, all right, let me cover up what I'm getting paid to do right now, and let's just have a conversation. And I just started asking, I'm like, well, what's the problem? I don't bike. Well, why don't you bike? Well, I'm older. We have women and Black women bike that are your age, if not older, that are biking. Well, my booty's too big. And it's like, we got that covered too. Like, what's your next excuse? And so as you start having these conversations, you realize that there are a lot of people that are really bike curious, but they don't know what to do next. And so one of the things that Black Women Bike is focused on now is really those young retirees. We're seeing a lot in DC because of the federal government and then the district system that people are retiring in their late 50s, early 60s. They're young, they're vibrant, and we're getting them on bicycles.
That's great. So Jeff, you talked a little bit about kind of the size of the bike network in DC. That doesn't just happen by accident to get over 70 miles of lanes and a growing network of protected bike lanes. How has DDOT changed as an agency to build out a bike network?
That's a great question. We've taken, under the leadership of our mayor, we've taken some fairly bold steps, and I'll talk about just a few of them from an organizational perspective. First, we aligned, several years ago, we realigned the agency so that our planning department and our engineering department were one. And I think that is a big step for us so that everything that we do from its initial concept all the way through engineering and construction flows through the same channel. And in fact, my colleague Sam Zimbabwe, who is here, oversees that entire operation so that we have a sense of consistency in our planning and our engineering. One of the other things that we did is set forth a strategic visionary document, which we call Move DC, which forecasts not just the next several years, but the next 30 plus years as to what our network could look like, what it should look like. And it maps out a strategy for us to get there. And so as we go forward, we continue to use a vision that's broad, that is system-wide, that connects all across the network. And we use that as a framework so that we actually have a plan in place. And those are just several of the steps that we've taken as an organization to make sure that we are maximizing our capacity to install new infrastructure.
So I wouldn't be doing my job as an advocate if I didn't ask the hard question, which is to say we've often said that the low-hanging fruit in town has been picked. The easy projects are done. How does the agency start to refocus, prioritize resources to go after some of those bigger, more complex projects?
Sure, that's a great question, and I should say, Greg, that part of how we have gotten to this point and how we've been so successful is through our partnership with the advocacy community, with WABA, with other stakeholders throughout the district who have really helped us build the capacity and the support, which I think is so critical for us to be able to execute on projects, to have community support built in, to have folks like Veronica and Ellen helping us navigate that, I think has been critical. Going forward, the most important thing that I do and that I think about every single day is how to deliver on our mayor's commitment to Vision Zero. It's something that I wake up thinking about every single day, and when I show up to work, it is the most important thing that I do, and that, I think, is critical to how we think about not just our bigger projects and our trails and our protected bike facilities, but how we think about specific intersections on the very local level, how we're making things as safe as possible for as many of the users of our roadway as possible. So it really requires not just the broader visionary planning, but also the day-to-day focus on all of our operations to make sure we're doing all that we can.
Veronica, you look like you had something you wanted to chime in there.
I think that moving forward, a key component too is a lot of representation of what biking can be. So many times, as a consultant, I work with a lot of different firms, and you see a rendering of a bike lane, and everyone in the picture is white. And this community might be a predominantly black community. So you're telling people that they're excluded, and representation is important. If we've learned nothing else from, Black Panther and Killmonger and all of that, is that representation is really important, and people want to see themselves in the future. And so I think that's also going to be a key thing, is making sure that people can see themselves in the future of biking.
I'll give you guys, as long as you want to clap for that. Wonderful. Thank you, Veronica. Ellen, you have another hat that you wear. You're the Deputy Executive Director for the Downtown Business Improvement District. Last week was the performance oversight hearing for the District Department of Transportation in front of our City Council. And you spoke about the bid's priorities for transportation, specifically around bicycling, walking, and transit. How do those interplay with each other? What are the bid's priorities, and why is it important?
Right. So, just a couple of things here. One is, if there's low-hanging fruit, it didn't feel low-hanging, Jim, did it, Jim Sebastian? did the first 5 years feel like it was all real low and easy to reach? And I think it's the fallacy of thinking that there was ever low-hanging fruit, because that first fruit was just as high as where now the north-south protected bike lane is, because we have grown. We are getting taller, so the fruit should still be the same height. Anyway, I just had to say that. Sorry. So no, where we are in the Downtown Business Improvement District is, we represent the interests of commercial and now residential property owners in a 1 mile square area in the heart of downtown. And all of the businesses that operate within those commercial buildings. And I want to go back to what Rob Puentes was saying. I thought he put it really well. Only in Washington, federal Washington, do they think in silos about transportation. Our constituency in the Business Improvement District, what they see is access and mobility for everybody. It's difficult to get around in congested areas where there isn't enough safe space to walk or bike, or for transit customers to get on and off the bus, and even, hold your breath, even for motorists to move with a reliable and predictable travel time through a corridor. Everybody's screwed with the current situation that we've got. And so going back, talking about cross sections, Veronica, what I was saying to Greg the other day is, we need to throw out the cross sections. We need to just take all those cross sections so 8 feet for parking, 10 feet for bicycles, 11 feet for cars. We just need to throw that out and say, what about not having parking on the street? Let's go with that. So let's redefine how we're going to slice that pie, because our members, the Business Improvement District, are standing up and saying, get the car storage off the street. So take it home, preach it.
Veronica, you have multiple hats in our local community as well. So you are the co-founder of Black Women Bike DC, a phenomenal program that I know many of you are familiar with. You've talked a little bit about kind of the changing group that you work with and engage in that group. What have you seen as a change, and who's getting involved in biking through Black Women Bike DC?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're attracting retirees. I am pushing 40, believe it or not, and I am one of the younger members of Black Women Bike. We're really getting these younger women of a certain age. I don't know if that's the appropriate term, but we're getting them biking and we're keeping them active. The other group that we've been able to engage in a lot of our rides are people with visual impairments. One of the things I hear a lot when we talk about access, we also have to think about persons with disabilities, and I think it's very easy to write them off to say, oh, well, they can't bike, they have a disability, whereas we're getting visually impaired people on a bicycle and a part of a community, and usually they're on a tandem with a sighted pilot. But even still, you're allowing people to be part of a community, and I now see more and more conversations that are happening. I'd like to think because of our work around getting people with visual impairments on bicycles, and so those are the two, I'd say, growing groups that we're seeing in our organization.
Jeff, DC is sort of known as being a national leader for emerging technologies in transportation. Currently, we're under a pilot phase for dockless bike share. We're certainly in conversations around autonomous vehicles. Where do you see down the road for transportation? I'd love to hear your thoughts on dockless bike share as well.
Sure. I think one of the things, for those who don't know, in September we launched a pilot initiative that goes until the end of April to allow dockless bikes to operate in the district. And I'm sure some of you have seen them, have ridden on them. And this really reflects our commitment to embracing and allowing this type of technology to be brought to market, to allow the folks who visit our city, who live in our city, to experience it, and really gives us the opportunity to evaluate it and determine how to best move forward, which is something that we're actively doing now as this pilot moves on. We also recently announced, the mayor recently announced a request for information on autonomous vehicles to allow for a testing pilot period in the District of Columbia, in a specific location here in Southwest DC. And again, that gives us the opportunity to see what technology is out there, what ideas are out there, to embrace it, to really best understand how it fits into the city and how we help shape how that progress looks. So I think those are just several examples of the way that we as a city have recently embraced technology, and how I think we will continue to do it going forward.
So I'll say that as for WABA, we were certainly very interested in the dockless bike share system and pilot, but we all have concerns about the number of bikes that would be in the city, or its impact on capital bike share, or who would use it. What have we seen? What are some of the initial observations?
I think it's been fascinating just to hear people's anecdotal observations of how the program is going. And I should say that we have at DDOT, we are fortunate and lucky to have just an incredible active transportation team. And these are folks, several of them who are here. Let's give them a round of applause. I see, yeah, wave your hands. So we've got Kim Lucas, Jim Sebastian, Michael Alvino, I think Mike Goodnow is here somewhere, and of course Sam Zimbabwe. These are folks who are out there not only helping us to understand what technology is out there and available, but really helping us understand and evaluate how these systems can best operate in our city. So I think going forward over the next several weeks and months, you'll see more, a little bit better of a picture as to how this will continue to go forward. But anecdotally, I know that I'm optimistic about the promise of technologies such as dockless, which really I think expand ridership, allow us to better connect members of the community to active transportation.
Veronica, you probably have something to say here too.
Oh yeah, I always have something to say. I think for me, the most fascinating thing is someone who's been an early champion of capital bike share. It's actually how I got my start in bicycle advocacy. And we've put a lot of effort in order to get equity in use of bike share. And I think Kim Lucas has done a really great job of being that champion. that being said, it's been amazing to see, the dockless bikes were like put out in DC on a Friday morning. And by Saturday night, just the sheer number of young black and brown kids that had figured out how to use the system and were biking around DC. And they are biking to school, they're biking to rec centers, they're biking to the library. So it lets us know that there is this large group of young people who want to bike as a way of getting around. Even the other day, because I have no problem walking up to people, there was a young man on the metro with a Lime bike. So I'm like, why are you on the metro with the Lime bike? And he said, well, there was no guarantee where he was going that there was going to be a bike available. So he figured, if there's a bike I have, let me just bring this. And I asked, well, why do you use Lime bike versus any of the others? And he was like, oh, well, it's cheap. And, he explained the whole system to me. So I think that there's a lot moving forward with the dockless. We need to continue to have the conversations with people who are using it and understanding. And then I think there's a lot of lessons that can go back to Capital Bike Share, such that we can try to, move forward those efforts to get more people using Capital Bike Share as well.
Great, thank you. So this is going to be a question for everybody. Jeff, you talked a little bit about partnership between the advocacy community, the business community, the advocacy community, everybody working together. So what do you need in your role to move the city forward as we're going to be looking at 10% mode share, looking at a platinum award down the road? What does DDOT need?
I think the continuation of these types of partnerships, certainly coming together in a forum such as this, where I can learn, where our team can learn about what's exciting, what's out there. These kinds of opportunities for us are very real. We pay very close attention to what's out there, and those taking advantage of those kinds of opportunities, I think, for us is a priority. And Greg, as you have often talked about, I think the role of the advocacy community here in the district is so critical to everything that we do. And it is getting that balance of supporting and encouraging us, but also advocating effectively. And I think you have done that particularly well, as have our other colleagues here. And that is the way that we get things done. And so I really, on behalf of DDOT, really appreciate that partnership, that collaboration. I think we continue to foster it, and that's how we make progress.
All right, so I'm going to answer this two ways. So one, for my Black Women Bike hat, I think what tends to happen is that people pull on advocates to be there for everything. And so I think that as you're asking advocates to be involved, you also have to think about compensation, whether it's for time, whether it's, supporting with resources. Because I know at Black Women Bike, we tend to get spread thin. And as an example, Rails to Trails was able to give us a grant to support their ongoing coalition. And so that is important to think about that when you're pulling on particularly some of the smaller advocacy organizations, but also making sure that gives them access and a seat at the table. In my consultant hat, I will say, I think that one, Black Women Bike, sorry, Inspire Green, the other hat. So I think that the work we do is dope. One of the things that Jeff mentioned was Vision Zero. Inspire Green did the plan for Vision Zero for the district, and then also the city of Alexandria. I think that there are a lot of small firms out here, women-owned firms, minority-owned firms, who can do really great transportation planning work. We understand the community. We have a different level of compassion for the community. So I think the thing that smaller businesses need is the opportunity to really be the leaders of projects, and to be the ones that are leading the engagement in the project, leading the design and the planning of that work, because I think we all do really, really great work.
Well, I was saying that earlier, that persistence is what's required on the part of advocates and on career bike and ped professionals and government agencies. So I would say, yes, that is true. But what we really need on top of that is a sense of urgency among our executives of departments, among our elected officials. We need their sense of urgency to accelerate the progress that we're making. As much as we have achieved, we have taken a very long time to achieve it. Life doesn't move that slowly in the 21st century. It needs to be accelerated. So we really need to hold our leaders accountable for that urgency, for that acceleration, and they should do so with the confidence that they have a core of experienced professional, and community members that have been doing this for a very long time that will support them every step of the way.
That's great. So on that, there's two notes. Just a show of hands, if you're a local planner, local advocate, WABA member, just raise your hand. Look at that, the community effort that it takes to do this. So I just want to give you guys a round of applause. If this is something you want to continue and engage with, I'd invite everyone to come join us on March 15th in 2 weeks. We're having our second annual Regional Vision Zero Summit. Mayor Bowser will be there, the director will be there, a number of local advocates, community members. So if you're nearby and you can get into town, we'd love to have you join us for that conversation. Our goal is that the Washington region has zero traffic fatalities for bicyclists, pedestrians, and drivers, of course. We'd love you to come and join that conversation. And again, I want to just thank Bill and the League and all of the staff for this wonderful event and our panelists for joining us. And congratulations again. Thank you.
Just carrying this letter from the mayor. I'm just carrying it around. That's great. Thank you all so much. And that wraps up this. We're moving to a break. Don't have any housekeeping notes other than share your stories. This is all about inspiration and collaboration and listening and learning and taking these stories back to the people you represent at home. So onward. Have a great summit.